When I was in junior high school, there was one girl that was always bullied by the other girls. She was the type of girl that was always reading books by herself, and because she had long hair, the other girls started calling her Ghost Girl. But in reality, she was really cute. Her eyes, usually hidden behind her hair, were big and beautiful. She had distinct double eyelids, and her eyelashes were so long. She was popular amongst all the boys, myself included, and people often tried to talk to her, but she only ever replied with 1 or 2-word answers. So that was that. That's probably why the other girls didn't like her. Slowly, the bullying began to escalate. Whenever the boys saw her being bullied, they tried to stop it, but it never stopped the girls from doing it again. On a side note, whenever you said good morning to her, she would always reply, but whenever you said goodbye to her, she never said anything. Only once did she ever say goodbye, and that was towards the girls who had been bullying her. That day, every single one of those girls died. They all met with an accident on their way home from school. I thought it was just a coincidence, but I was still scared. If she said goodbye to me, then I'd die too. I stopped saying goodbye to her after that. But there were others who still said it to her. I thought they were amazingly brave. But until we graduated, that girl never said goodbye to anyone ever again. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Before we get started today, I'd just like to mention that we now have a Discord for the podcast. You can head over to kowabana.net for the link, but you can come and join us to talk about the show, other Japanese horror, get some help with your own Japanese, and much more. I'd love to hear from you guys, so I hope to see you over there. Now, for this week's show, we're going to be looking at Noroi, Japanese curses. When you think of Japanese horror, at least for me, 2 things come to mind: creepy ghosts with long black hair, and curses. The type of curses that never have a happy ending, and usually end with everyone dead, or perhaps wishing they were. These types of stories became especially popular starting in the late 90s and early 2000s with movies like The Ring and Ju-on, and they're a staple of Japanese creepypastas today. So let's get right to it. Our first story this week is about a young man who makes an unexpected friend at university. He's handsome, smart, and popular, and could have any girl he wants. But instead, he chooses to spend all his time with him. Why? What secret is he hiding? Find out in I Reached Out and Touched the Notepad by his PC. When I was in university, I had a friend I'll call A. A had amazing grades, was good looking, and had a great personality. I was just an ugly, gloomy guy, so it was a mystery as to why he wanted to be my friend. He was just a really handsome bastard. You would think a guy like him would have a girlfriend and lots of affluent friends, but for some reason he was always with me. One day I said to him as a joke, "You're a good-looking guy. Why don't you go and hang out with some people cooler than a loner like me?" His face became troubled, and he was like, "I feel safe with you though. Besides, you're not a loner if I'm with you anyway." I had no idea what he was saying. A and I met in an occult circle. The group was originally a place we'd go to eat and drink, play some games and so on, but it began to change. they started doing group activities less and less, so we often ended up at each other's places instead, where we'd spend night after night talking about strange phenomena. Although, having said that, it was really more just me talking about all the things I knew regarding paranormal phenomena and ghost spots and so on. A would sit there and nod his head as he listened like he was having a ball. This went on for some time before one day I found something shocking at his house. That day, A went out to the convenience store to get some cigarettes, and I decided to stay behind. The convenience store was quite a distance away, and while waiting for him, I began to think I should have gone along too. I looked around his room. There was really nothing there. He didn't have a TV or a sofa, no games or manga either. There was just a desk, the cushions we were sitting on, a laptop, and some difficult-looking books in a bookcase. Are just these cushions really enough for an unpopular guy? I bet his closet is empty as well. Is he hiding something? Not that I'm gonna look or anything. While having these thoughts, my hand reached out to the notebook sitting next to his laptop. I don't know whether he was using it as a notepad, but there were shopping lists and electronic model numbers written on it. I had a quick flick through, but it didn't look like any other pages had anything on them. They were all blank. But then, suddenly, somewhere around the middle of the book, a page covered in letters stood out. What's this? I thought, stopping to read what was there. Die, 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 hurry up, die, 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 die. After that, there were a lot of old kanji I couldn't understand or read. Maybe some kind of sutra? The page was black with letters. The next page was the same. Why was this happening to A? He was so gentle. But what shocked me even more was that his name was there as well. I felt like I'd seen something I shouldn't have, so I quickly put the notepad back and pretended to sleep until A returned. There was nothing different about him when he did, and when I got up, the notepad had been put away. He just laughed and asked, "Were you sleeping the whole time? You didn't even use the computer or anything? You think I want to look at all your hidden goodies? Nah. There's nothing to do in your place, so I just slept the whole time," I replied, without mentioning anything about the notepad. Upon hearing that, A just laughed and had a smoke. After that, there wasn't anything particularly different about A. Just like always, we'd do our circle activities on our own, drinking and eating and talking about strange things at home. But about half a year later, at the start of summer vacation, A suddenly died. It didn't seem like a suicide. It was apparently a heart attack. I was the one who found him. Even though we'd arranged to meet at his place, he wasn't answering the phone or the doorbell. We had keys made for each other's places in case of an emergency, so I opened the door and went inside. Despite his shoes being at the entrance, there was no response when I called out. I walked through his empty apartment, and he was just sitting there, on his cushion, not breathing. He looked like he was just taking a nap. When I realized he was dead, I was dumbfounded. I just cried. I called his parents, the police, and an ambulance after a bit. It felt like I'd lost everything. I don't really have much memory of what happened afterwards. All I remember is that his family asked me if I knew anything about his private affairs, like his diary or his side accounts and such, because they couldn't find anything at all. I just said that I thought he'd killed himself. He'd cursed himself, you see. He liked those sorts of things. Curses, weird religious rites, and so on. A few years after A died, I began to realize why A never had any friends outside of me. Never made a girlfriend or kept anything at home. I never found out exactly how or why he died though. I forgot to mention it, but of course we never found the notebook. I wonder whose handwriting that was in it. As we saw in this story, it's fairly typical of Japanese Noroi to involve writing the curse down and repeating a certain word or phrase over and over. In fact, the word Noroi itself has roots in the word norito, meaning Shinto ritual prayer, and also the word noru, meaning to proclaim something. In old times, there was a strong religious belief in the power of words and how they could affect people, for better or worse. Our next story is about a woman who has had bad luck her entire life, and no matter what she does, she just can't seem to escape it. But is there a deeper reason for the unfortunate events that keep happening to her? Find out in I'm Just Waiting for Death. Do you mind if I tell you about my scary experience? I haven't told anyone about it until now, so I'd like to talk about it a little. The people in my family can see ghosts. I first saw one myself when I was in elementary school. We went back to my grandfather's house during the summer holidays. It was in a village deep in the mountains. His house was really big, and there were lots of persimmon trees. There was a person standing there, covered head to toe in blue clothes, and wearing a hat covering their face. I thought it might have been the postman, and as I went to approach him, my grandfather went, "Don't look!" and covered my eyes with his hands. I had no idea what was going on, but we spent the rest of the day indoors, and they wouldn't let me go outside again. I later found out that it was an evil spirit that was trying to spirit me away. After that, the number of spirits I saw increased. I often saw them on school trips, on my way to and from school, on the way back from cram school, etc. While I was in my hometown, my friends often saved me. Like, one time, one of my friends called out my name, grabbing my arm and pulling me back. At that moment, a truck drove past, nearly hitting me. "What are you doing walking out so suddenly like that?" She got angry at me, but as far as I could tell, I was just standing still. I hadn't moved at all. "I was just talking to my friend about school," I said. But when I said that, she replied that I was standing there alone. And as the light turned red, I suddenly started walking across the road. It was at that time I realized that dangerous things were happening around me. Everything that happened up until this point was before starting high school. Then, when I started high school, I was hit by a truck. Both my legs were broken, and I was admitted to hospital. At the time of the accident, I saw a woman with black hair. Amongst all my vague and indistinct memories, I clearly remembered that. After I was released from the hospital, it became apparent that she was following me around, causing accidents and making things drop in front of me. The scariest thing, however, was when I was at home alone, and suddenly there was a fire in the kitchen. I most definitely didn't leave the stove on, and there was nothing lying around that could have lit the fire either. But the fire burned out of control and I was injured. My parents also have the ability to see ghosts, and noticing all the strange things happening around me, they took me to a temple. However, they couldn't exorcise me. It's difficult to say this, but what's haunting you is a curse afflicting the women in your family. It's not something I can cleanse. You've done well to come this far already, the priest said. I didn't know why I was cursed, but if I died, it would apparently pass to someone else in the family. Even if I carry a rosary or protection charm, they just break and fall apart and have no effect. I'm only 19 years old, but it doesn't seem like I'll live for much longer. Lately, my health has been getting worse, so I'm writing this to leave behind for my parents. It's difficult to speak or even move these days. I'm just waiting for death. Having a powerful ability to sense the supernatural isn't a good thing. I think that woman realized I could see her, so she attached herself to me. Even though I'm their only beloved daughter, my life is about to be snatched away. That's the scariest thing, isn't it? What we saw in this story is another fairly common trait of Japanese curses. They tend to afflict families and care little for those who, in the present day, may have had nothing to do with the origin of the curse. In a worst-case scenario, there isn't even a way to be rid of the curse. It will continue until the entire family line is dead. Which brings us to our next story. This one is also about a family curse, but this time it's tied to a certain family heirloom. The members of the family are absolutely forbidden to take it out of the house. But why? What harm could it possibly bring? Find out in The Heirloom We Couldn't Bring Out. In my family, there are 3 treasures that we call heirlooms. I don't know if they have value to anyone but us. The first is our family tree. Our family tree goes back over 400 years, written over several scrolls, and kept in paulownia boxes. The second is a katana. A long time ago, one of our ancestors received it as a gift from his lord. The last one is a mirror. It's not so much a mirror as it is an antique polished piece of metal. It's like something you'd see in a Japanese history book, and fits in the palm of your hand. This also sits in a very fine paulownia box. There is a particular way these 3 items must be handled. Only the family patriarch of that particular generation may remove the family tree from its box. The sword could be sold for a considerable amount of money, but it must never be sold. The family head must also clean and maintain the sword once a month. The mirror must remain enshrined in the family altar, and every day it must be checked to see that it is safe. It must never be taken off the family lands. Not even the family head may remove it from its box. The rules are something like that. This story is about that bronze mirror. If it's really true. The bronze mirror has a strange shape. A round mirror part sits in a hexagonal pedestal. Even if you look into this mirror, Perhaps due to the rust or small scratches on it, it appears to have lost the ability to really reflect anything. However, at 2 centimeters thick, it's rather heavy and feels kind of magical. When I was in elementary school, my friend and I had a rare item you're proud of competition, where we went to the park after school and showed off our treasures. Everyone brought toys, but I took along the family mirror. I told everyone not to touch it, but of course they didn't listen to me. In the end, it was decided that I had the item most like an actual treasure, so I won. I triumphantly marched home. What was waiting for me at home was exactly what you would expect. A thorough scolding from my father. There was nothing wrong with the mirror, but my father persistently questioned me, harshly telling me off and making me promise never to touch it again. In my eyes, it wasn't like I broke it or anything, so I couldn't understand why I was getting such treatment. However, in the end, I apologized, and that was the end of it. My father forgave me. After that, I wasn't especially interested in it, so I didn't touch it again. Then, last year, I turned 20, and my father summoned me. I'd entered university and was living away from home. Wondering why I'd been called, I went back. My father asked me to sit in the room with the family altar and began to speak. To sum up, he told me about the family heirlooms and how to handle them. Our genealogy had roots in Onmyodo, and the family heirlooms came to us because of our dealing with cursed items. Most items had been donated as gifts to museums, and thus few were left. It was here that my father stopped to take a breather. I was a little fed up that he'd called me for such a boring story, and thinking that he'd finally finished, he started again. Now, let's get to the important part. Oh, come on. Drowsiness was taking over me, but I couldn't do anything but sit and listen to him seriously. My father took the mirror out of the altar, put it on the table, and began talking again. The contents of the conversation were unbelievably separated from reality. I'll sum it up. So, the reason why this bronze mirror couldn't be taken out. In history, it had been taken out 3 times, and all 3 people met disastrous ends. So, why couldn't we take it out of the box? Because the mirror is a mirror that shows a person's death. Until recently, the taboo about the mirror had been thought to be superstition, but due to events 30 years earlier, it was now strongly protected. 30 years earlier. My grandmother died 30 years ago. I heard it was an accident, but I was never told the details. Apparently, if someone tried to remove the mirror from this plot of land, they would meet with disaster. It was passed down that the 3 people who tried to remove it had all met with horrible fates and died. The first time it was taken out was by a subordinate of Ishida Kazushige during the Sengoku era. However, after the Battle of Sekigahara and Ishida's death, it was returned. The second time was during the Second World War. Military police forcibly came to take the mirror away for medal collections, and my grandfather watched them get cut down by American machine gun fire. The third person was my grandmother. This mirror was also a possession of hers. While she was alive, my grandmother treated stories of the mirror's curse as superstition, and even took it out to show guests when they came to visit. It was a curious antique mirror that didn't reflect anything. My grandmother came to Osaka during Obon, and when she was about to leave, she bowed to the family's 3 heirlooms. When she touched the mirror, she accidentally saw her own face reflected in it. She went pale, and apparently compared her face over and over with the bronze mirror and the bathroom mirror. Then she said, "My face in this family heirloom. It's pitch black." My father told her it was all in her imagination, but she had apparently seen something terrifying and couldn't stop panicking. She asked if she could take the mirror to the family temple in Kyoto and have it purified. It would be against the family rules, but if it would make her feel better, my father agreed to it. But, he said, he came to regret it. Why? Because of that, the bronze mirror was able to manifest its largest ever curse. On 12th August 1985, at 6:04 p.m., an airplane from Haneda to Osaka took off. The mirror was on board. So the flight referenced at the end is Japan Airlines Flight 123, the deadliest single aircraft accident in history. The plane took off on August 12, 1985, from Haneda Airport in Tokyo, heading towards Osaka International Airport. This was during the Obon season, when people typically go home to spend time with their family and pray to their ancestors. About 12 minutes after takeoff, the rear pressure bulkhead burst open, causing rapid decompression. The pilots were unable to take control of the plane, and it clipped several mountain ridges before landing in a state forest in Gunma Prefecture. Of the 524 people on board, only 4 survived. The site where the plane landed has become a rather infamous ghost spot, and you can find a lot of stories, like this one, that talk about the flight. Our last story for this week is about a young man who goes home for his cousin's wedding. It goes off without a hitch, but when he gets back to his hotel, strange things start happening, one after the other. When he visits his uncle the next day and tells him about it, he finds out the horrifying truth. Find out what happens in The Compensation for Marriage is Too Much. After several years of dating, my cousin finally decided to get married. This story is about the trip I went on to attend his wedding. The ceremony finished without fanfare, and after the wedding banquet, I went to my hotel. I had let them know I would be checking in late beforehand, but as I was finishing up at 10 p.m, the front desk clerk said, "So, that's a room for 2? Huh? I thought. I was there by myself, and I had made a reservation for 1. The front desk clerk said, "The single rooms are all full, so would you mind staying in a 2-person room? There's no extra charge." I agreed and went up to the room. It was a Japanese-style tatami room, with 2 futons laid out. The front desk clerk said someone would be coming shortly to remove the extra futon, so I waited, and a woman in work clothes arrived shortly thereafter and cleaned up. With only 1 futon left in an 8-mat tatami room, it was kinda lonely, but I was tired, so I quickly showered and got into bed. I felt like I was dreaming, but then suddenly... I heard laughter, like it was right in front of my face. And I was so surprised that I woke up and recoiled in horror. My heart was pounding in my chest. But not only could I not hear any laughter, the room was completely silent. There was no one but me, huddled in the middle of the room. I had no idea what was going on. I turned on all the lights and looked around the room, trying to figure out just what had happened. I stopped to have a smoke, wondering if it was just a dream, but I couldn't sleep, so I watched TV until morning. After checking out the next day, I went to see my uncle, the father of the cousin that got married, to say hello. Neither he nor my aunt seemed tired from the events of the day before, and we chatted about university and other such things. It had been a while since I spoke to them last, so we ended up chatting for quite some time. Then, after we'd run out of things to say, I brought up what happened at the hotel. When I told them about the laughter, my uncle's face suddenly turned serious. Your mother was born here, so you probably did hear laughter. I don't know whether you should know or not, but if you heard the laughter, I must tell you about it, so listen closely. I'll sum up what he said. In the mountains behind my uncle's house, there is a shrine dedicated to the god of marriage. People who lose their children worship him there. The god takes the firstborn child of those he takes a special interest in. In return, any children born after will be protected. When the god takes an interest in someone, even if that person is alone, they will appear to be with someone else. There have been instances of people receiving meals for two, even when alone. When the god is going to take a child, he spends the night with them. When he returns, laughter can be heard. I didn't really believe him, but then my uncle said, "Your cousin also heard laughter, which is why he hesitated to get married for so long. It took us a while to convince him." "Doesn't that mean his child will be taken?" I asked. "That's all over with now," my uncle said. "His next child will be okay." There's a girl I'm interested in right now, but of course it's difficult to tell her about all of this. But I do plan to tell her one day. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. If there are any other themes or stories you'd like to see in future episodes, you can let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for even more scary content in the future. Thanks guys, and we'll see you again next week for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.